From San Jose, in the heart of Silicon Valley, it's theCUBE, covering Big Data SV 2016. Now your hosts, John Furrier and George Gilbert.
Okay, welcome back everyone. We are here live in Silicon Valley for theCUBE. This is SiliconANGLE's flagship program where we go out to the events and extract the signal from the noise. I'm John Furrier with my co-host George Gilbert, analyst at Big Data at wikibon.com. Our next guest is Christina Noren, who's the CPO at Interana, just announced, just joined the company 2 weeks ago. Welcome to theCUBE.
Glad to be here.
Love your background, been at Splunk in the early days, saw that growth prior to the IPO, and was it through the IPO?
Yeah, so I joined when we were still in stealth mode and no one knew who we were, and we hadn't decided we were going to be open source or closed source, and stayed there through the IPO. So
that's a great wave that you rode. One, you guys invented and pioneered a ton of the stuff that we see today, land and expand, SaaS, big data, value creation, kind of creating the gold out of the trash, as they say in data, log data, if you will. But now you're at Interana. Talk about the new company, the new role, Chief Product Officer, which is fantastic. We love product folks on theCUBE. Share a little bit about this new company you're with.
Yeah, so Interana is fabulous. I learned about it through my network, and the more I got to know it, the more I realized that it was picking up everything that was still left to do around event data that really has excited me about it, because Splunk was my first go at event data. I first was group manager for data center monitoring at MSN in the late 90s, dealing with this class of data. And when I learned about Interana really was returning me to that original passion of giving the decision makers and the product managers and the growth people and the marketing people, the people who are deciding, what services to roll out, how to design them, how to market them, giving them direct access to the value that's in this event data. And I feel like a lot of the last few years in this sort of big data space that's gotten created has been, returning everything to the high priest of data. And so this was getting back to that sort of user focus that really inspires me. And as Chief Product Officer, what I get to do is make that as immediately obvious as possible to all of the users that we're really building this for, and so that's exciting.
One of the things the tagline for the company is the behavioral analytics solutions for event data at scale, the key word behavioral data. You mentioned some of the things at MSN, and I have a search background, and you look at that back in the day, behavioral and contextual were the gods of how things got done on search. And then now you got Web 2.0 and you're at Splunk. So this behavior of data is interesting. So the pattern recognition, machine learning, a lot of tech involved, imagining. Now you have this event data, log data, or whatever you want, wherever it is, in multiple systems, are really the nuggets to stitch together insights. Share what that means today, because search was pretty much in a siloed system, platform specific, but now out in the wild, all this data is out there.
Well, I think that there have been different challenges at different times with this class of data, and there's been a very slow building realization about all the value that's in this data, and it's spread very slowly through different organizations. And so, the workloads to answer questions that marketers might have, or that growth people might have, or product managers might have, are inherently different workloads because they're more concerned, like as a product manager, I'm concerned with a user's journey through my product. I don't care if it's a commercial product for enterprises, enterprise product like Splunk or Interana, or if it's a consumer product. I care about the user's journey, which is a very different analytic workload on the same data than what an IT person doing troubleshooting or a security person looking at security threats wants to do. And so, this is the first system that's been able to look at the kinds of scale of data that our customers at Interana, like a Tinder, like a Sonos, these companies have, Microsoft Bing, these companies have a scale of data where the business people have been forced to accept summaries that aren't very insightful and don't let them really watch that user journey. So that's what's different.
Take us through what enticed you to join this company. Obviously, your background fits perfectly at a unique perspective, which is amazing, and we love that. Was it the product roadmap? Did they have a product roadmap? What did you glob onto? What was the big aha moment for you when you looked at what Interana was doing?
It was a combination of the vision the people and their ability to execute on that vision and the technology that they've built. And then the customer validation is important, but I've been in this space a long time, so it's like that was interesting. But the real thing was that the vision was one I could really get behind, and the people. I mean, this has been just an amazing team to get to know, and see how able everybody in the company is to really do their part in making this something that users can actually discover and use. But from a technology perspective, as I started to learn building block by building block, I realized that some things they were doing were things that I'd seen done before at different times, but I knew to be the right thing if this is the set of things you want to do with the data. And some things were totally brand new, and it was like, oh, well, this would allow us to do the things that I haven't been able to do in the past. And
so timing was right for a lot of these.
And then the timing, and I think that some of these use cases, I and people around me, we've had in our sights for a long time, but it's pretty obvious, and this is where the customer validation comes in, is, at these large customers that Interana has, there are places where hundreds of people are routinely logging into Interana, and that's a readiness of the people who have value to get in this data that hasn't been seen before.
Let me ask, I want to key in on two things you were mentioning. One, that we seem to have gone back to the high priests of data. And one of the qualities, good or bad, with Hadoop gives you, great flexibility, mix and match capabilities, but almost as if they're acknowledging the issue, they have a zookeeper to keep track of all the zoo of, components. Mm-hmm. How do you simplify that for your usage scenarios? And then what are some of those new workloads that you can handle that were not possible before? Sure. Is that because you've simplified the back end, or you've modeled something new on the front end?
Well, I think there's a few different things. So first off, it's a full stack solution. And I think other than cloud-based offerings, I think Splunk is the only widely successful full stack solution to date, but for a different set of users and workloads. But what simplifies this for our end customers, and it's part of why Splunk was successful, it's part of why Interana is becoming successful, is that really, if you're focused on the end user, they don't care about, picking this back end versus this back end, or choosing what they want to store columnar, or what they want to store in a, search index, et cetera, et cetera. They just want it to work. So we take that, it should just work for our customers' perspective, and we really abstract a lot of that. But behind the scenes, inside Interana, you have a set of engineers who are building and optimizing the technologies that are necessary to deliver the performance and the use cases that our customers want. So, there are some very unique things about the back end of Interana's technology that have not been done before in commercial technologies. And you were going to get into what the use cases were.
Yeah, I want to understand
just to be very specific, it's the patterns at scale. So it's very different for you to ask a system a question and say, I want a count of people who visited my promotions page, by hour for the last week. Not interesting. I want a count of people, broken down by geography or gender or age or whatever. But I have this hypothesis as a product manager or a marketer that people who do X and then Y and then Z, where I've just thought of X and Y and Z on the fly, I have a hypothesis those are the people that I retain longer, and I want to test that hypothesis, and then I want to show that to my management, and I want to invest in pushing more towards X. That's a really flexible analysis on a pattern of behavior that has to be dynamically aggregated from raw events on the fly. And I have never seen a system that can do that at scale across all actors, across all events, like Interana can. And when you really get to know why Interana customers are choosing us, it's because they're the companies where the marketers, the growth hackers, the product managers are the most data-driven and forward-looking, and they're realizing they need that capability, and counting is not enough.
You mentioned validation. You mentioned Tinder, their customer, and those on the site. Other huge traffic-oriented sites. This is the new digital consumer. Peter Burris was just on our analyst segment talking about this, and this is something that we've been hardcore on. I want to get your thoughts on, because what you're basically saying is the old way of doing data capture to get analytics is boring. You said ho-hum. I don't know, it was a nice comment, but basically what it's saying is that the digital journey or the progression of the user is taking now new nonlinear vectors.
Yes.
And that is something that you used to do on the fly, very difficult.
Yeah.
For folks that don't know what that means, it's really hard. Now, at scale, what is the key technology that you guys have? Because that is where everyone's going.
Yeah.
That digital journey is not just get a lead
Yeah.
and pass it to some analog process. It's fully digital end-to-end.
It is our proprietary data store and the query model and the execution engine on top of that. And then, you mentioned user interface. I think the important part is we're putting it in a user interface that is accessible to these people. But the back end is a totally different way of persisting and executing queries against these raw events than has been seen before.
So how do I deploy you guys? So I'm a customer, say, I'm totally love you guys. This is exactly what I want, this digital progression, whatever you want to call it, the end-to-end journey online, not analog at all. What do I do? Do I just, as a SaaS, do I buy software? What's the...
At the moment, we license it, and you can deploy it in the cloud, or you can deploy it on premises. So I think there will be a lot of different deployment models. I mean, really, one of the things I'm looking at is what is the easiest and fastest way to get this capability into the hands of these business users, and what has the fewest barriers to, to adoption. So I think there are a lot of different ways that we can offer this in the future. But for our customers right now, we offer a full stack solution that they can license.
Mainly because they're sophisticated enough, they can just take the software.
No, we help them with it, and so it's, we really do try to abstract that, and we have a generation of abstracting that. So it's, we are focused on the users in the organization who want to get the value out of the data, not focused on adding more burden to IT organizations, data organizations for integration.
That's something that you're going to put on your agenda to figure out more consumption models.
We've already made it, very, very easy for the large scale customers we have, and we can make it even easier.
Would it be fair to say, when you look at a customer, a framework for customers like maximizing retention, deepen engagement, are you essentially preparing a set of queries or ways to interact with the data so that the customer gets up and running with a solution really fast? Because you've got the full stack, and because you know where to get the data, it's sort of out of the box and just works, like you said.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of building blocks in the system, and we train our users as to how to use and extend those building blocks to look at things, the sort of classic kinds of, retention and churn and all those kinds of things. But our system makes it very easy for the end users to define new building blocks that are very specific to their organization. So again, if I have that XYZ pattern that I'm interested in, we provide them an interface where they can define that and start to look at that.
And specifically, what skill level do they need to take those building blocks and create a new pattern?
I think it's really, I tend to push back on people talking about technical or non-technical. It's just, pet peeve of mine. I think it's missing the point. The people who get the most value out of our system know their businesses and their business processes and have a mentality where they can, where they can say, okay, this is probably the digital, trail that's being left behind. But they are not data scientists, they are not developers, they are not coders, they are not SQL geeks. They're people who can think in a structured way about their business, which today, product managers, marketers, growth hackers, those people can think that way. Well,
the people on the front lines right now it's flipped upside down. Basically what you're saying is you're flipping it on its head, saying the people close to all the action, whether they're, there could be some developers on the app side, but mainly the people who know the usage consumption. Yeah. And making these decisions on the fly where they think there might be value. Yeah. Is that what you're saying? Standing stuff up pretty quickly?
I think it's they can they can do fresh analytics on questions that wouldn't have occurred to us and wouldn't have occurred to their developers. And if they told their developers to go build them a report, it would have generated 1,000 more questions, and they would have stopped there. So
They would just stop dead in the tracks, be like, no ops kicks in at that point. So I got to ask you a question about your background in Splunk, because, we're in an era now where the rubber's hitting the road. Business value is the conversation. Certainly we've seen the market soften up on some of the B rounds, and C rounds only are getting funded if there's huge traction, validation, mainly by customers. You mentioned that. You guys have that. So what is the view from your perspective at Splunk? Because you've seen this before. You've seen this wave where, okay, you have this technology enablement, you have business value being validated, but yet now we're in a different era of the business. It's now, big data is now in its seventh year, if you will, or certainly for the cube. What's the dynamics in the marketplace today? What's your thoughts on that? Because a lot of people are trying to scratch their heads and make bets. What do you see in the market today?
Well, I think there's a lot of spending on people and services around this sort of big data trend. And because it's in this sort of high price of data, there's actually, I think, there's been a slowing of value to the end users. I mean, I know at Splunk we were constantly being asked for this sort of end business user value. And we delivered a lot of it, but it was a little bit more sort of the Splunk priests would deliver the reports, which was still better. But
better than nothing at the time.
Exactly. But I think in terms of where this market is going, I think that the lines of business that are going to benefit from this analytic capability need to be able to make business cases and then realize the business value independently of developers or data scientists or IT, and rely on vendors to deliver that. And I think that's going to be a much bigger market, and one where there's more value really being realized.
When you talk about that, I don't know how far you've gotten in your most mature customers, but what would that look like where you've got a data-driven business customer, where the focus isn't on, hey, how do we run the back end and how do we feed the data, but the focus is on all these users who now can make data-driven decisions. Mm-hmm. Do you have a customer that's that mature, or do you see even in departments?
I mean, the numbers I've been seeing internally is, I think, and I hope it's okay that I say this, but I think we've seen a doubling of the total number of weekly users across our customer base since the beginning of this year. I mean, that's phenomenal. That's a metric I was very concerned with at Splunk, and we saw high numbers of users per installation. And it was wonderful when we started to see dozens or hundreds of users, and to be seeing that growth in something something like Interana at this stage, and seeing that it is these business users who have the direct questions and not priests of data, that's really phenomenal.
That means that the success and the product market fit is right there.
Yeah. I mean, and yet there's so much more opportunity to do even more, and there's so much more opportunity to do, real community-driven education and shared best practices to get that to happen even more.
I know you're new to the company, so what are some of those things you look forward to doing? I mean, obviously, you got a great base, foundation, growth. What are some of the things what twinkle in the eye do you have for things that you're geeking out on? Wow, I really want to make that easier. Or what product things are you falling in love with that you see maybe coming down the road?
Well, I mean, I do see this difference of looking at sequences of behaviors as something that you can do in the product today, and it's a whole lot easier than it's ever been, and it actually executes at scale. But now we have a lot of examples of users doing that, and we can sort of step back and say, okay, what's really special about this? I think we can make that even more discoverable and composable for our end users. So I think there's a next generation we can do of just really pushing. And it's like, when you ask me about why I joined, it's like, it's not about product roadmap, it's about product vision and technology vision. And it's like, there's the next stage of growth into that really huge and wonderful vision. So I think there's that piece. And then I think there is a lot of the community, because I'm very much a whole product person. So, the community of users and the tools we put in place to help that community find one another is as much a part of the product for something like this that is user-centered and is around enabling a whole movement of people. And so I see a lot of opportunity on that community front that we, haven't even touched the surface of our users there.
Christina, great insight. Congratulations on the new role. I want to ask you the final question for the folks that are watching. We've got a lot of developers, but also a lot of business people, but also we have a lot of product folks out there. And being a product leader at this time of the history of the tech business is interesting. It's not waterfall, it's more agile. Make things easier, minimalistic. These are the things we always see stuff on Quora and Medium about, don't be a product manager, you got to be more developer. What does it take to be a great product manager right now? Because that's attracting a lot of talent in the new, I would call the new product management role, where it is much more real time. It's much more about some, abstracting away the complexities. It's about making things more elegant, obviously design, and you put all that on the table. At the end of the day, you got to ship a product. You have valuable customers. What's your view on being a product manager today?
Well, I mean, I think it's the most exciting time in our industry to be in product. I mean, it's enormously fun, and I think for a certain mentality. I mean, obviously gravitating towards data. I'm a data-driven person, so and I like the machine. So I think being a head of product these days is about building a machine for constant communication between a marketplace and users and customers, and an agile engineering organization, and sort of the care and feeding of that machine once you've built it, and sort of creating this culture of listening to users and customers. So it's a broad answer.
Always be learning. That's a big thing, right?
But I think that there's a lot of very limited ways of understanding Agile, very limited ways of understanding this data culture that are just the wrong. Above all, you still need a point of view, and you need opinions. You need to understand that your customers are not going to tell you what to build, because they often don't think what they really need can be built, or don't really have any idea what's really going to solve their problems. But they're going to tell you, they're going to tell you valuable things. But it's about building a machine for learning, and from learning deeply from what is really going on in the market.
So I was just going to add one last comment. Having been a product manager way back in the early days of Lotus Notes, but also have been inspired by Steve Jobs, you don't build what customers say they want. You build what they really want. That old joke of, Henry Ford would have just built faster carriages, but people wouldn't have asked for automobiles.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I used to teach on this topic, sort of middle years of Splunk. I did a lot of speaking on how to do product management in an agile world. And the example that I borrowed from my dear friend Rich Marinoff is he uses teleporters as his classic product management example.
That's
and
great.
So the customer says, I need a rocket ship. And the sales goes, they need a rocket ship or they won't buy. And it's like, okay, well, you back it up. Jet travel's not fast enough. But we've got this teleporter technology in R&D.
Exactly.
How about that?
Exactly.
And I think that's the mentality that I try to bring.
Teleporting is the future. We'll be teleporting to Dublin for Hadoop Summit. Christina, Noren, great to have you on theCUBE. Great conference, great insights. It's a data-driven world, new patterns at scale. This is the insight, making it easier and getting the value. This is theCUBE, of course. We're data-driven. We'll be right back with more great data and insights here in Silicon Valley after this short break.